Knox slammed his boot into the reinforced door, sending it flying off its hinges. The sound echoed through the concrete hallway like a gunshot. Behind him, Raven checked her rifle's magazine while Viper scanned the corridor through his scope. "Target acquired," Viper whispered into his headset. "Third floor, northeast corner. Clients alive." The job had seemed routine when they'd taken it 6 hours ago. Extract Dr. Miranda Harlow from the Blackstone Research Facility. Standard corporate kidnapping scenario. Some competitor wanted her research, grabbed her, and her company hired Knox's team to get her back. $3 million for a 12-hour operation. Now, as they moved through the facility's sterile hallways, Knox realized this wasn't standard anything. "Movement ahead," Raven called out, raising her weapon. "Something's coming." The first rule they'd learned about Blackstone came from the dying security guard they'd found at the entrance. Don't look directly at the subjects. The guard had repeated it 5 times before bleeding out. His eyes rolled back so far, only white showed. A wet, slithering sound filled the corridor. Knox motioned for his team to halt. Whatever approached them moved like water flowing uphill, defying basic physics. The sound grew louder, accompanied by a rhythmic tapping that reminded Knox of fingernails on glass. "Raven, flashbang! Viper, cover the rear exit! I'm going through!" Knox commanded. The grenade detonated with a brilliant flash. Knox charged forward through the smoke, his tactical gear absorbing the impact as something large and gelatinous crashed into the wall beside him. He didn't look directly at it, keeping his gaze fixed on the exit sign ahead. His team had encountered the second rule 20 minutes earlier when they'd found a researcher locked in a supply closet. Stay in groups of 2 or more. The researcher, Dr. James Kellerman, had been coherent enough to explain that isolation meant death in this place. Anyone left alone for more than 30 minutes simply vanished. Not killed, not taken, vanished, as if they had never existed. "Clear," Knox shouted as they reached the stairwell. "Moving to target location." Raven's voice crackled through the communication. "Boss, we've got company. Multiple heat signatures converging on our position." The third rule had come from surveillance footage they'd reviewed. No sudden movements. The creatures in this facility responded to rapid motion like predators tracking prey. Move slowly and deliberately, or become lunch. Knox tested the stairwell door. Locked. He placed a small explosive charge on the hinges and stepped back. The controlled detonation blew the door inward, revealing a spiral staircase that wound upward into complete darkness. "Viper, take point. Night vision only. Raven, watch our 6. They ascended slowly, their boots silent on the metal steps. The facility's power had been cut hours ago, but emergency lighting cast everything in an eerie red glow. Knox focused on breathing steadily, maintaining the calm that had kept him alive through a dozen similar operations. The fourth rule had been spray-painted on a wall in what looked like blood. "Keep moving forward." The message was surrounded by scratch marks that gouged deep into the concrete. Below it, someone had scrawled, "They can't follow if you don't stop." "Target floor," Viper announced. Knox checked his watch. They'd been inside for 47 minutes. The extraction window closed in 3 hours, and they still needed to locate Dr. Harlow, neutralize any threats, and reach the evacuation zone. The hallway on the 3rd floor stretched in both directions, lined with laboratory doors. Most stood open, revealing overturned equipment and scattered papers. Whatever had happened here had been sudden and violent. "Room 347, Knox said, reading the mission briefing on his wrist display. "That's where our target was last seen." They moved down the corridor in formation. Knox noticed that some of the lab doors had been welded shut from the outside. Thick metal plates covered the windows, and warning signs in multiple languages covered every surface. "Boss," Raven whispered, "look at this." She stood beside a door marked, "Subject Housing. Level 3, clearance required." The metal was bent outward, as if something inside had punched through 6 inches of reinforced steel. "Keep moving," Knox ordered. We're not here for sightseeing." Room 347's door hung open. Inside, they found signs of a struggle. Overturned chairs, broken glass, and what looked like claw marks scored the walls. But no Dr. Harlow. Viper checked the adjoining rooms while Raven examined the security terminal. Knox studied the damage patterns, trying to piece together what had occurred. "Got something," Raven announced. "Security logs show Dr. Harlow was moved to sub-level B7 approximately 4 hours ago." "Sub-level?" Knox frowned. Intel said this facility only had 3 floors. Intel was wrong. Raven pulled up a building schematic. "This place goes down 7 levels underground, and according to this, sub-level B7 is marked as Containment Protocol Alpha." Knox didn't like the sound of that. In his experience, anything labeled containment usually meant bad news for extraction teams. "Viper, report. Adjacent rooms are clear, but I found something interesting. Medical equipment, surgical tools, and what looks like restraint systems. Heavy-duty stuff, boss. Built to hold something that really doesn't want to be held." Knox made a decision. "We go down, but we stick to the rules, we watch each other's backs, and we complete the mission. $3 million says Dr. Harlow is worth the risk." They located the elevator shaft in the facility's central hub. The car was stuck between floors, but the emergency ladder provided access to the lower levels. Knox went first, his weapon ready, while Raven and Viper maintained overwatch from above. The sub-level corridors were different from the research floors, narrower, with lower ceilings and exposed pipes that dripped condensation. The air tasted metallic, like blood mixed with industrial disinfectant. Emergency lighting flickered randomly, creating a strobe effect that made navigation difficult. Knox relied on his tactical flashlight, keeping the beam low to avoid drawing attention. "Heat signature ahead," Viper reported through the comm. "Human-sized, stationary." They approached cautiously. A figure sat slumped against the wall. A security guard, his uniform torn and stained. Knox checked for a pulse and found one, weak but steady. "Hey," Knox said gently, shaking the man's shoulder. "Can you hear me?" The guard's eyes opened. They were bloodshot and wide with terror, but focused. You shouldn't be here. They've got her in the deep containment, level B7. "Who's got her?" "The test subjects. They've been loose for hours. The whole protocol failed." The guard gripped Knox's arm. "You need to know the rules. They're not like anything normal." Knox helped the man sit up straighter. "We know about the rules. Don't look directly. Stay together. No sudden movements. Keep moving forward." The guard shook his head frantically. "No," he gasped. "There's one more. The most important one." He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "In the deep levels, they feed on fear. Show them you're afraid, and they'll tear you apart. But if you can face them without fear, if you can look at what they really are and not break, they can't touch you." The man's head fell back against the wall. His breathing stopped. Knox stood up, processing this information. 5 rules total. The 5th one was the key to survival in the deepest part of the facility. "Boss," Raven's voice came through the comm. "We've got movement on the upper levels. Something big is heading for the elevator shaft." "Copy that. We're going deeper. Whatever's up there, we don't want to meet it." They found the access to level B7 behind a blast door that had been torn open from the inside. The metal was twisted like paper, and strange marks covered the walls around the opening. Beyond the door, a long corridor stretched into darkness. The air was warmer here, and Knox could hear a low humming sound, like machinery running at maximum capacity. "Stay alert," he ordered. "Remember the rules. Whatever we encounter down here, we face it without fear." They moved forward into the deepest part of the Blackstone Research Facility, where Dr. Miranda Harlow waited for rescue in the heart of Containment Protocol Alpha. The corridor opened into a vast circular chamber lined with holding cells. Most of the reinforced glass fronts had been shattered from within, Strange substances coated the floors and walls, and the air hummed with an energy that made Knox's teeth ache. In the center of the chamber, suspended in a cage of metal bars, was Dr. Miranda Harlow. She appeared unconscious but unharmed. Around her cage, 3 figures moved in slow circles. They had once been human, Knox realized, but something had changed them. Their limbs were elongated, their skin had a translucent quality, and they moved with a fluid grace that seemed to mock human motion. "There she is," Viper whispered. "How do we get to her without alerting those things?" Knox studied the situation. The creatures hadn't noticed them yet, but that wouldn't last long. The cage was suspended 30 feet above the chamber floor, accessible only by a narrow catwalk that ran around the room's perimeter. "Raven, can you hit the cage's release mechanism from here?" She peered through her scope. "Negative. It's blocked by the support structure. Someone needs to get close." Knox checked his equipment. He had enough explosive charges to bring down the cage, but that would definitely alert every creature in the facility. They needed a subtler approach. One of the creatures stopped circling and lifted its head, as if sensing something. Knox held his breath, remembering the 5th rule: show no fear. The creature's head turned toward their position. Where its eyes should have been, Knox saw only smooth skin. But somehow, he knew it was looking directly at him. "It knows we're here," Raven whispered. "Stay calm," Knox replied. "Fear is what it wants. Don't give it any." The creature smiled, revealing teeth that were too sharp and too numerous. It opened its mouth and spoke in Dr. Harlow's voice. "Help me. Please, someone help me." Knox felt his team tense beside him. The voice was perfect, desperate, and completely wrong coming from that thing's mouth. "Ignore it," he ordered. "That's not her." More voices joined the first, all pleading for rescue, all using Dr. Harlow's voice. The sound echoed through the chamber, creating a chorus of false distress calls. Knox stepped into the chamber, his weapon ready. Time to finish this. The real work was just beginning. Knox walked directly toward the creatures, his rifle trained on the nearest one. The chorus of false voices grew louder, more desperate, but he kept his expression neutral. Fear would get them all killed. "Raven, circle left. Viper, take the right side. When I give the signal, light them up." The creatures stopped circling Dr. Harlow's cage and focused entirely on Knox. Their heads tilted in unison, studying him with eyeless faces. The one in front opened its mouth wider, and Dr. Harlow's voice poured out. "Please don't hurt me. I just want to go home." Knox smiled grimly. "Nice try." Behind him, Raven moved with practiced silence, her boots making no sound on the chamber floor. She'd been Knox's partner for 3 years, ever since that disaster in Myanmar when his previous team hadn't made it out. She understood his methods, trusted his judgment, and could put 3 rounds in a dime-sized target from 200 yards. Viper had joined them 8 months later, a former Navy SEAL who'd grown tired of military bureaucracy. His real name was Marcus Webb, but everyone called him Viper because of his patience and precision. Knox had seen him wait motionless for 6 hours to take a single shot that saved an entire diplomatic mission. Now both of them were counting on Knox to get them out of this facility alive. He fired 3 rounds center mass. The bullets struck the creature and passed through without effect, leaving no wounds, no blood. The thing laughed with Dr. Harlow's voice, the sound echoing through the chamber. "Physical attacks won't work," Viper called out. "These things aren't exactly solid." Knox had expected as much. He'd seen enough classified operations to know that some problems couldn't be solved with conventional weapons. Time for Plan B. "Raven, remember that job in Prague? The one with the electrical anomalies? You mean when we had to adapt our tactics on the fly?" She was already switching to her backup equipment. "Yeah, I remember. Same principle applies here. If bullets don't work, we find what does." Knox studied the creatures more carefully. Their translucent skin seemed to shift and flow like liquid, but there was structure underneath. Bone, muscle, organs, all modified, but still fundamentally biological. "Cover me. I'm going up." The catwalk that ran around the chamber's perimeter was accessible via a maintenance ladder. Knox slung his rifle and started climbing, ignoring the creatures below. They could mimic voices and play mind games, but they seemed bound to the chamber floor. The ladder rungs were slick with condensation, and Knox had to maintain a steady grip to avoid slipping. 30 feet below, the creatures tracked his movement with their eyeless faces, occasionally calling out in voices he recognized. "Knox, this is Control. Abort the mission immediately." His former commanding officer's voice, perfect in every detail. "Knox, your mother is dying. Come home." His sister's voice, pleading and desperate. He ignored them all and continued climbing. As he reached the catwalk, one of the creatures spoke again. This time it used Raven's voice. "Knox, get down from there. You're going to get yourself killed." He glanced down at Raven, who was shaking her head frantically. The real Raven pointed at the creature, mouthing, "Not me." "Yeah, I figured," Knox muttered, continuing along the catwalk toward Dr. Harlow's cage. The suspension system was more complex than he'd initially thought. Multiple cables supported the cage, each one secured with electronic locks. A control panel mounted on the catwalk wall showed the status of each lock. All were currently engaged. Knox examined the panel more closely. The display showed 12 separate locking mechanisms, each with its own status light. Red meant engaged. Green meant released. All 12 lights glowed red. The manufacturing stamp on the panel's corner confirmed his suspicion. Sikorsky Systems, Model S4400. He'd encountered the same system during a warehouse infiltration in Detroit 2 years ago. The security designer had used a predictable pattern for emergency overrides, but first, he needed to understand the power source. Knox traced the electrical conduits leading to the panel. Standard 220-volt commercial power, with a backup battery system in case of main power failure. The facility's generators were still running despite the chaos below. Below, the creatures had begun moving again, but their attention remained fixed on Knox. They spoke in a mixture of voices now. Dr. Harlow, Raven, Viper, even Knox's own voice pleading for help. One of them had started climbing the ladder. "Raven," Knox called down. "We've got a climber." She spun and fired a burst of incendiary rounds at the creature on the ladder. It fell back to the chamber floor, but its skin wasn't burning like the others had. This one seemed more resistant to heat. "They're adapting," Viper observed, learning from what happened to the others. Knox worked faster on the control panel. Standard industrial design, probably manufactured by Sikorsky Systems. He'd bypassed similar systems before during warehouse raids. "Ignore the noise," Knox called down to his team. "Keep them occupied while I work." The control panel required a security code. Knox tried the obvious combinations first. 1234, 0000, facility codes from the mission briefing. Nothing worked. "Boss," Viper's voice came through the comm. "The real Dr. Harlow is trying to say something." Knox looked down at the cage. The woman inside was conscious now, pointing at something on the catwalk near Knox's position. He followed her gesture and saw a small plaque mounted on the wall. "Emergency release code, Harlow 7749. Knox punched in the numbers. The panel beeped, and the electronic locks disengaged with a series of metallic clicks. The cage began to descend slowly toward the chamber floor. The creatures reacted immediately. They moved toward the descending cage with fluid speed, their mouths opening to reveal more of those needle-sharp teeth. "Not happening," Knox said. He pulled a thermite grenade from his belt and dropped it directly between the creatures and the cage. The device exploded in a shower of white-hot sparks, creating a barrier of intense heat and light. The creatures recoiled, their translucent skin seeming to ripple in the heat. Knox realized they were vulnerable to extreme temperatures, not conventional weapons. Raven, incendiary rounds. Now. Raven switched ammunition and fired. The incendiary bullets struck the nearest creature and erupted in flames. The thing screamed, not with Dr. Harlow's voice, but with its own inhuman shriek. The cage reached the floor with a metallic clang. Knox rappelled down his climbing rope and hit the release mechanism. Dr. Harlow stumbled out, disoriented but mobile. "Dr. Miranda Harlow?" Knox asked, keeping his weapon ready. "Yes." Her voice was hoarse but steady. "Are you here to get me out of this place?" "That's the plan. Can you move?" "I can run if I have to." The remaining creatures regrouped, circling the small group. Knox noticed they kept their distance from the still-burning thermite residue. Fire was their weakness. "Viper, do you have any more incendiary rounds?" "2 magazines worth." "Good. We're going to burn our way out." Knox activated his tactical flare and tossed it toward the chamber exit. The bright red flame illuminated a clear path through the corridor beyond. "Move fast, but remember the rules. No sudden motions, stay together, and show no fear." They advanced in formation, Dr. Harlow protected in the center of the group. The creatures followed but maintained their distance, hissing and making increasingly desperate attempts to mimic familiar voices. "Knox? Wait for me," one called in his ex-wife's voice. "Boss, I'm hit," another said, perfectly copying Viper's inflection. Knox ignored them all. The real danger wasn't the psychological games. It was the dozens of other heat signatures that Viper was tracking on the upper levels. As they moved through the corridor, Knox noticed the facility's infrastructure was deteriorating rapidly. Pipes leaked strange fluids that pooled on the floor, and electrical systems sparked randomly. Whatever had created these creatures was still active, spreading throughout the building's systems. "Movement ahead," Raven reported, raising her weapon. 4 more creatures emerged from a side passage, these ones different from the chamber guards, smaller, faster, with skin that seemed to absorb light. They moved in perfect coordination, like a pack of predators. "Formation Delta," Knox commanded. His team responded instantly. Raven took cover behind a support pillar and provided suppressing fire with incendiary rounds. Viper flanked right, using his thermal scope to track the creature's movements. Knox advanced straight up the middle, drawing their attention. The creatures were smart enough to split up, trying to surround the team. But Knox had fought coordinated enemies before. The key was disrupting their communication and forcing them to react instead of plan. He tossed a thermite grenade into the center of their formation. The explosion scattered them in different directions, breaking their coordination. Raven and Viper picked off the confused creatures one by one. "Clear," Viper announced, after the last creature dissolved into ash. They continued moving toward the stairwell, but Knox could hear more sounds echoing through the facility. Footsteps, voices, and other noises that didn't sound human at all. "We've got company coming down the elevator shaft," Viper reported. "Multiple contacts, moving fast." "How long until they reach us?" 3 minutes, maybe 4. Knox calculated the distance to the extraction point. They were 7 levels underground with no working elevator. The emergency stairs would take at least 10 minutes to climb, and that was without resistance. "Dr. Harlow," Knox said as they moved, "what exactly was this facility researching?" "Biological enhancement projects. We were trying to create improved human physiology using genetic modification." Her voice was tight with exhaustion. "The subjects you encountered were volunteers. Military personnel who agreed to experimental procedures. What went wrong? The modifications worked too well. Enhanced strength, speed, regenerative capabilities. But the neural changes were unexpected. They became something else entirely, something that feeds on human fear and pain." Knox understood now why the facility had been abandoned. The military had created perfect predators and lost control of them. How many test subjects were there originally? He asked. 47 in the first batch, but the genetic modifications allowed them to reproduce asexually. By the time we lost containment, there were over 200. That explained the heat signatures Viper was tracking. This wasn't just a rescue mission anymore. It was a full-scale containment operation. They reached the stairwell, but Knox could hear movement above them. Heavy footsteps and the same wet, slithering sounds they'd encountered earlier. Raven, can you reach topside on the radio? Negative. Too much interference down here. Knox made a tactical decision. We're not going up. We're going out through the service tunnels. Dr. Harlow looked confused. What service tunnels? Every facility like this has emergency evacuation routes, usually connected to the municipal storm drain system. Knox consulted his building schematics. There should be access through the mechanical levels. They descended 2 more levels, moving through maintenance corridors filled with pipes and electrical conduits. The air was thick with steam and chemical vapors, but Knox could smell fresh air somewhere ahead. The mechanical levels were a maze of intersecting passages and equipment rooms. Knox used his facility schematics to navigate, but the map was outdated. Several corridors had been sealed off, forcing them to find alternate routes. This place is like a damn ant farm, Raven muttered, squeezing through a narrow passage between 2 massive heating units. At least ants don't try to eat your face off, Viper replied. Knox checked his watch. They'd been underground for over 2 hours. The extraction window was closing rapidly, and he could hear more movement in the passages behind them. In one equipment room, they found evidence of the facility's original purpose. Banks of computer servers hummed quietly, their displays showing biological data streams. Charts and graphs tracked genetic modifications, cellular regeneration rates, and neural activity patterns. Dr. Harlow stopped at one of the terminals. This is real-time data from the test subjects. Look at these readings. Knox studied the screen. The data showed accelerating growth rates and increasing aggression levels. Whatever was happening to the creatures, it was speeding up. How long before they become completely uncontrollable? He asked. Based on these trends, maybe 6 hours before they start breaking through the facility's outer walls. That changed everything. Knox had assumed they were dealing with a contained threat, but these things were actively evolving. Soon they'd be strong enough to escape the facility entirely. "Contact!" Viper shouted. 3 more creatures emerged from a side corridor. These ones different from the others. Larger, more muscular, with skin that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Knox didn't hesitate. He emptied an entire magazine of incendiary rounds into the lead creature. It burst into flames, thrashing wildly before collapsing into a pile of ash and bone. The other 2 charged. These creatures moved differently than the ones they'd encountered earlier. Faster, more coordinated, with an intelligence that went beyond simple predatory instinct. Knox realized they were dealing with an evolved variant. Raven caught the second one with a sustained burst of fire, while Viper used his remaining thermite grenades to create a wall of flame that blocked the third creature's advance. But the third creature didn't retreat. Instead, it began to change shape, its body flowing like liquid as it adapted to the heat. Knox watched in fascination and horror as the thing developed what looked like natural heat armor. "They're learning," Dr. Harlow said quietly. "The genetic modifications include rapid adaptation capabilities. Each encounter makes them stronger." Knox made a tactical decision. "We don't fight them anymore unless we have to. From now on, we run." "Keep moving," Knox ordered. The service tunnel access was exactly where the schematics indicated. A heavy metal door marked emergency evacuation route, authorized personnel only. Knox placed a shaped charge on the lock and stepped back. The explosion echoed through the facility like thunder. Somewhere above them, Knox heard answering roars as more creatures responded to the noise. Time to go. The tunnel beyond was a concrete tube that sloped upward at a steep angle. Emergency lighting provided minimal visibility, but Knox could feel air movement indicating an exit somewhere ahead. They climbed for what felt like hours, but was probably only 20 minutes. Dr. Harlow was exhausted, stumbling frequently, but she kept moving. Knox respected that. He'd worked with supposedly elite operatives who had less determination. "Light ahead," Raven called out. The tunnel ended at a grated opening that looked out onto a wooded area. Dawn was breaking, casting long bars of golden light through the trees. Knox had never been happier to see daylight. He kicked out the grate and helped Dr. Harlow climb through. They emerged from what appeared to be a storm drain outlet in a small forest preserve about 2 miles from the facility. "Extraction point is 1 click north," Knox said, checking his GPS. "We're almost home." Dr. Harlow stopped walking. "Wait, there's something you need to know." Knox turned to face her, noting the serious expression on her face. "The creatures down there, they're not the real problem. They're just the beginning." "What do you mean?" "The research we were conducting, it wasn't just about creating enhanced soldiers. We were developing a weapon, a biological agent that could transform entire populations." Knox felt a chill that had nothing to do with the morning air. "Where is this weapon now?" "That's what I was trying to destroy when they captured me. There are 12 canisters of the agent stored in the facility's vault. If those things get loose, if they reach a populated area." Knox understood the implications immediately. The creatures they'd fought were individual test subjects. The weapon Dr. Harlow described could create thousands of them. "How do we stop it?" "The facility has a self-destruct system, nuclear failsafe designed to contain biological hazards. But it requires 2 keys to activate, and I only have one." She pulled a small metal cylinder from her pocket. Knox examined it. Definitely military hardware, probably connected to some kind of authentication system. "Where's the second key?" "Dr. James Kellerman had it, the researcher you would have found in the supply closet." Knox remembered the man they'd encountered early in the mission. He'd been alive when they'd found him, but they'd left him behind to continue the extraction. "He's still down there," Knox said. "Then the facility is still armed, and those creatures will eventually find a way out." Knox looked back toward the Blackstone Research Facility. Smoke was rising from several locations, and he could see movement in the upper floor windows. "Raven? Viper. New mission parameters." "Boss," Viper said carefully, "our contract was to extract Dr. Harlow. That's done. This isn't about the contract anymore. If Dr. Harlow is right, we're looking at a potential extinction-level event." Knox pulled out his tactical radio and switched to the emergency frequency. "Control, this is Extraction Team Alpha. We have a code black biological hazard, requesting immediate air support and hazmat protocols." The response came back within seconds. "Copy that, Alpha. Air support en route." ETA, 20 minutes. Knox looked at Dr. Harlow. "Can that self-destruct system be activated remotely?" "No," she said. "It requires physical presence in the control room and simultaneous key insertion. Both operators have to be there at the same time." "Then we go back." Raven stepped forward. "Knox, that place is crawling with those things. It's suicide." "Maybe. But if we don't do this, those creatures will eventually breach containment. They'll reach the nearest city, and then we'll have millions of casualties instead of just us." Knox made his decision. He'd spent 15 years in special operations, and he'd never run from a fight that mattered. This was the fight that mattered most. "Dr. Harlow, you're staying here. Raven, escort her to the extraction point and wait for air support. Viper and I are going back for Dr. Kellerman." "Like hell," Raven said. "We started this together. We finish it together." Knox looked at his team, the 2 best operators he'd ever worked with. They'd followed him through a dozen impossible missions, and they were ready to follow him into one more. "All right then, let's go save the world." Knox spent 20 minutes planning their approach while Dr. Harlow coordinated with the incoming air support. The facility's layout had changed since their first infiltration. with new organic growths blocking several access routes. The service tunnel is still clear, Raven reported, studying satellite imagery on her tactical tablet. But thermal shows massive activity in the upper levels. Whatever those things are doing in there, they're busy. Knox studied the intelligence data. Heat signatures clustered around the facility's central areas, with smaller groups moving through the corridors in organized patterns. The creatures were exhibiting pack behavior now, working together toward some common goal. They're not random anymore, Viper observed. Look at these movement patterns. They're systematic, almost military. The neural modifications included enhanced learning capabilities, Dr. Harlow explained via radio. They're probably developing their own tactical doctrines based on our previous encounter. Knox appreciated the challenge. He'd fought human opponents who adapted to his methods, but never biological weapons with accelerated evolution. This would require everything he'd learned in 15 years of special operations. "Equipment check," he ordered. They were down to their last magazines of incendiary rounds, 2 thermite grenades, and a handful of conventional explosives. Not much for a mission that might determine the fate of civilization. "I've got an idea," Raven said. "The facility's chemical storage room is on sublevel B4. Industrial solvents, acids, oxidizers. If we can reach it, we can create a lot more fire than what we're carrying." Knox liked the sound of that. "Viper, can you plot a route that avoids the main creature concentrations?" "Maybe, but it'll take us through areas we haven't scouted yet. Could be anything waiting in there." "Better than fighting our way through 100 evolved predators," Knox decided. "We go in fast, grab what we need, and get to Dr. Kellerman." The return trip took them 40 minutes. They approached the facility from the east, using the service tunnel they'd escaped through. Knox could see that the situation inside had deteriorated rapidly. More windows were broken, and strange organic growths were beginning to spread across the building's exterior walls. The growths looked like a cross between coral and muscle tissue, pulsing with their own rhythm. Knox realized the creatures weren't just occupying the facility. They were transforming it into something else entirely. "The contamination is accelerating," Dr. Harlow observed through Knox's radio. "You have maybe 2 hours before those things start reproducing on their own." Knox and his team moved through the facility with grim efficiency. The chemical storage room was exactly where the schematics indicated, and still largely intact. Raven quickly identified the most useful compounds while Viper rigged improvised incendiary devices. "Aluminum powder, potassium permanganate, and magnesium strips," Raven reported, stuffing chemical containers into her pack. "This stuff will burn hot enough to melt steel." "How much can we carry?" "Enough to clear a path to the control room, maybe enough to slow down pursuit." They found Dr. Kellerman exactly where they'd left him, still alive, but barely conscious. The man had managed to barricade himself into a storage alcove, but Knox could hear creatures prowling nearby. "The control room," Knox said, shaking the man awake. "Where is it?" Kellerman's eyes focused with effort. "Sublevel B9, Biohazard Containment Center. But you'll never make it. They're everywhere now, and they're different, smarter. They've learned to work together." Knox helped the doctor to his feet. "We'll make it." The journey to sublevel B9 was indeed a running battle. The creatures had multiplied and evolved, filling the corridors with their wet sounds and copied voices. But they'd also developed new tactics. Instead of charging directly, they used coordinated ambush techniques. Groups of creatures would drive Knox's team toward predetermined kill zones, where larger specimens waited. Others used the facility's ductwork to attack from unexpected angles. Knox countered with his own adaptations. Raven's improvised chemical weapons created barriers of intense flame that the creatures couldn't cross. Viper used his knowledge of the building's structure to predict and counter their ambush attempts. Knox led from the front, making split-second tactical decisions that kept his team one step ahead of their pursuers. The running battle consumed most of their ammunition and chemical supplies, but they carved a path through the facility's depths. Knox felt a familiar satisfaction at outsmarting and outfighting an intelligent enemy. They reached the control room with minutes to spare. The chamber was a sterile white space, dominated by a central console, with 2 key slots positioned exactly 10 feet apart. Both keys have to be turned simultaneously, Dr. Kellerman explained. The system won't accept sequential activation. Knox took one key while Dr. Kellerman took the other. They positioned themselves at the console, ignoring the sounds of creatures gathering in the corridor outside. "On my count," Knox said. 3, 2, 1, turn. The keys engaged with a metallic click. Warning lights flashed throughout the control room as automated systems began the final countdown sequence. "Nuclear detonation in T-10 minutes," an electronic voice announced. "All personnel evacuate immediately." Knox and his team ran. They reached the surface with 3 minutes to spare, just as military helicopters arrived overhead. The evacuation was swift and professional. Within 90 seconds, they were airborne and climbing rapidly away from the facility. The nuclear explosion lit up the morning sky like a second sunrise. The facility and everything in it was reduced to radioactive ash in an instant. Knox watched the mushroom cloud rise through the helicopter's window. Dr. Harlow sat beside him, exhausted but alive. "Is it over?" she asked. "It's over," Knox confirmed. "The threat is contained." 3 days later, Knox sat in a secure debriefing room at an undisclosed government facility. The official report would classify the Blackstone incident as an industrial accident. The truth would remain buried under layers of classification. His team had been paid the agreed-upon fee, plus a substantial bonus for services above and beyond contract specifications. Dr. Harlow had been relocated to a new research position with enhanced security protocols. The world would never know how close it had come to biological catastrophe. Knox closed the mission file and walked out of the facility into the afternoon sunlight. His phone buzzed with a new message. Another extraction contract. Another impossible mission. He smiled and headed for his car. There was always another job, another challenge, another chance to make a difference. The world was full of monsters, but Knox and his team were ready for them. All of them.